Ethan Ward had lived alone for so many years that silence had become a close companion to him. His ranch sat miles away from the nearest town, surrounded by open fields, tall grass dancing with the wind, and the soft sounds of horses moving around their wooden pens. He woke up every morning before sunrise, fed his animals, fixed fences, and worked in the same calm rhythm every day. He did not mind the loneliness. In fact, he believed the quiet life protected him from the unpredictable world he once tried to be part of. People knew him as the man who liked his distance. Some had tried to talk to him in the past, but Ethan always kept conversations short, polite, and closed. He had no family left, no close friends, and no desire to create new bonds. It was easier that way. Life was simple, predictable, peaceful. On one cloudy evening, however, something unusual happened. Something that pushed Ethan out of his quiet pattern and into a situation he never expected. The sky had been warning of a storm since noon. Dark clouds covered the sun, and cold wind brushed across the land. Ethan had just finished checking the barn doors when he noticed something strange at the far end of his fence line. At first it looked like a shadow lying on the ground, almost blending with the earth. But as he came closer, he realized it was a man, motionless, weak, and clearly struggling. Ethan felt a sudden pull of concern, something he had not felt in years. He hurried forward and knelt down beside the stranger. The man's breaths were shallow, his clothes worn and covered in dust. Ethan called out to him, and after a moment, the man's eyes opened slowly. They were filled with exhaustion and fear, as if he had been running from something or fighting against time. "You're hurt," Ethan said softly. The stranger tried to speak, but only a faint whisper came out. He lifted the man carefully, supporting him with strong arms built from years of ranch work, and carried him back toward the small house near the barn. The storm started to roll in, wind growing louder, pushing against Ethan's back as if trying to stop him. But Ethan continued, step by step, determined to get the man inside safely. Once inside, Ethan laid the man on a small cot near the fireplace. He quickly lit the fire, warmed water, and brought the man a cup to sip. The stranger struggled to take it, but finally managed a small drink. For a long moment, he just rested, breathing slowly, letting the warmth from the fire reach his chilled body. Ethan waited patiently, watching with eyes that carried both curiosity and caution. Eventually, the man spoke, his voice rough but clear enough to understand. "Thank you," he said. "My name is Daniel." Ethan nodded. "I'm Ethan Ward. You're safe here. Tell me what happened." Daniel looked around the room, studying the walls, the shelves, and the quiet space that felt untouched by chaos. His hands trembled slightly as he held the blanket Ethan gave him. It seemed like he was trying to gather strength before answering. When he finally spoke, his words carried a heaviness that made Ethan listen carefully. "I was traveling," Daniel said, "for many days. I thought I could reach someone before my strength gave out, but I did not. I collapsed near your ranch." Ethan noticed something strange in Daniel's tone, like he was hiding something important. He did not push him for details. Instead, he asked, "Do you need a doctor? I can ride to town." Daniel shook his head weakly. "There's no time." Ethan felt a deep discomfort inside him. He had helped animals through sickness and age, but seeing a human being speak so openly about the end of his life shook him in a way he had forgotten was possible. Daniel took a slow breath and continued, "There's something I must tell you, something I must leave in safe hands." Ethan leaned forward slightly, not out of excitement, but out of concern. The fire crackled in the background, filling the room with a soft glow. "I have a wife," Daniel whispered. "Her name is Lena. She is young, gentle, and alone in this world except for me. She's waiting for me. Far from here, in a small, abandoned cabin. I told her to stay hidden until I returned. Ethan felt surprise rise inside him. A wife? Hidden? Why? Daniel reached into his coat with trembling fingers and pulled out a small metal key tied to a thin string. He held it out to Ethan. Ethan hesitated, unsure what this meant. But Daniel insisted with a slow nod. This key, Daniel said, opens something important. Something that belongs to my family. I was trying to protect it and protect her. But I failed. And now, I need someone I can trust. Ethan's brows tightened slightly. Daniel had only known him for a few minutes. Why would he trust him with something so delicate? Daniel seemed to read Ethan's thoughts. You helped me without asking who I am. That tells me everything. I met many people on my travels. Some turned me away. Some looked at me with suspicion. But you brought me inside a warm home. You showed kindness. That is why I'm asking this of you. Ethan felt small tension in his chest. He was not used to praise. He wasn't used to being relied on either. Helping someone with shelter or water was easy. But taking responsibility for someone's wife, someone he didn't know, was something far beyond what he ever imagined. Daniel placed the key in Ethan's hand and closed Ethan's fingers around it with great effort. His hand was cold, weak, but firm with intention. Please find her, Daniel whispered. She doesn't know how bad my condition is. She'll be scared. She will have nowhere to go. Ethan swallowed. He wanted to say he wasn't the right person, that he wasn't good with people, especially not someone who needed deep emotional support. But he could see the truth in Daniel's eyes, a truth that left no space for refusal. Daniel continued, his voice almost fading. There are people who want what I carry. People who will look for her when they can't find me. I need you to take care of her. To protect her. Even if it means she becomes your responsibility. Promise me, you won't leave her alone. Ethan felt the weight of those words in his chest. He had lived alone by choice, believing that solitude protected him from responsibility or pain. But now, a dying man was asking him for a promise that could change his quiet life forever. For a long moment, Ethan didn't speak. Daniel watched him with tired eyes, full of hope and fear together. The storm outside grew louder, but inside the small room, there was a deep stillness. Finally, Ethan nodded slowly. Relief washed across Daniel's face. His body softened, as if the promise gave him the peace he needed. He whispered, a soft, "Thank you," barely audible. Ethan stayed by his side, adjusting the blanket, making sure he was warm, and offering what comfort he could. As the night grew darker, Daniel's breathing slowed. His eyes closed gently, and although Ethan hoped he would wake again, he knew the truth. Daniel's final wish had been spoken, his last trust placed in Ethan's hands. Ethan sat quietly beside him, the key still warm in his palm. He stared at it with a mix of confusion and responsibility. His peaceful life had shifted in a single evening. A stranger had walked into his world carrying a story full of secrets, danger, and a young woman depending on a promise Ethan was still trying to understand. The storm continued outside, but inside the house, Ethan realized something very important. Tomorrow, his life would no longer be the same, and whether he felt ready or not, he had a duty to fulfill. The next morning started differently for Ethan. Usually, he woke to the calm sounds of his ranch, the soft rustle of horses, and the orange glow of sunrise slowly touching the fields. But that morning, the house felt heavy, almost colder than usual. Daniel lay silent on the small cot, and the peaceful expression on his face told Ethan that the man's journey had already ended during the night. Ethan stood beside him for a moment, not sure what he was supposed to feel. He hadn't known Daniel long, yet the man's final words still echoed in the room. The key in Ethan's pocket felt heavier than it should have. as if holding not only metal, but trust, fear, and a future Ethan had never expected. Ethan stepped outside to breathe. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean. The grass shone with leftover rain. The sky was clearing, and the air carried the fresh scent of a new morning. But even the quiet beauty of the ranch could not distract his thoughts. A dying man had left him a responsibility he didn't understand fully. A woman named Lena. Alone, frightened, waiting in some abandoned cabin. And whatever secret Daniel carried, whatever danger followed him, was now connected to Ethan. He fed the horses first, mostly to give himself time to think. The animals sensed something different. They stayed close, nudging him gently, as if offering comfort. Once the chores were done, Ethan went back inside, cleaned the cot, and covered Daniel respectfully. Then he saddled his horse, tied a small bag with water and food, and took the key once again in his hands. The string was worn, the metal old, and Daniel's last request replayed in his mind. Please find her. She will have no one if you do not go. Ethan mounted his horse and began the ride toward the abandoned cabin Daniel had described. The path was rough, narrow in some places, hidden between tall trees and small hills. Ethan rode slowly, scanning the land for any sign of trouble. He kept wondering what kind of life Lena must have lived if her husband spent his last moments worrying about her safety. He didn't know what to expect when he met her. Would she be frightened, angry, in disbelief? And how would he tell her that her husband never made it back? The sun was rising higher by the time Ethan reached the cluster of old trees where Daniel said the cabin would be. It took him a moment to find it, almost hidden behind thick branches and overgrown bushes. The wooden structure leaned slightly, its roof patched with old tin sheets. Smoke did not rise from the chimney, and the door was closed tightly, as if someone inside feared every sound from the outside world. Ethan dismounted quietly and walked slowly toward the door, not wanting to startle whoever was inside. He knocked gently. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then, a soft sound. The slight shift of footsteps. Cautious and fearful. Ethan spoke in a calm tone. Lena? My name is Ethan Ward. Daniel sent me. There was silence again. The air felt still. Then, from behind the door, a trembling voice answered. Where is he? Why isn't he with you? Ethan felt his heart tighten. He knew this moment would be painful for her, but he had no choice except honesty. Before he could speak, the door opened halfway, and he saw her for the first time. Lena was young, with gentle eyes that carried worry and exhaustion. Her clothes were simple, and her hair looked like she hadn't rested properly in days. She scanned Ethan's face, searching for answers in his expression. He isn't coming back, is he? She whispered. Ethan shook his head slowly, and the truth settled in her eyes like a heavy stone. She covered her mouth and stepped back, tears filling her eyes. Ethan waited quietly, giving her space, letting her feel what she needed to feel. She held the edge of a small table for support, her shoulders shaking. After a few moments, she wiped her tears and looked at Ethan again. Did he say anything? Ethan nodded gently. He wanted you safe. He asked me to find you, to bring you somewhere you won't be alone. Lena lowered her gaze. She was silent for a long time, thinking, struggling to accept the situation. The cabin felt cold inside, almost empty, except for a bed, a chair, and a few belongings. It was clear she had been living here with fear, waiting for Daniel to return with hope that he would save them from whatever danger chased them. Why you? She asked softly. Did he know you? Ethan shook his head. We only met because he collapsed near my ranch. I helped him. He trusted me. Maybe because he felt he had no other choice. Lena let out a small breath, somewhere between sadness and acceptance. Then she nodded slowly. Daniel always believed in people more than I did. If he trusted you, then I will try to trust you too. Ethan felt a small wave of relief. He knew forming trust would take time, but at least she wasn't rejecting help outright. She packed a few belongings into a small bag, a shawl, a book, and a folded piece of paper she kept pressed against her heart. Ethan didn't ask about it. Some things needed to be shared in their own time. As they stepped out of the cabin, Lena hesitated at the doorway, looking back at the place where she had spent days waiting with hope and fear mixed together. Ethan waited quietly until she finally stepped forward. He helped her onto the horse, making sure she was comfortable. Then took the reins and began guiding them back toward his ranch. The journey was slow. Lena remained quiet most of the time, lost in her thoughts, occasionally wiping tears when she thought Ethan wasn't looking. Ethan didn't push her to talk. He understood that silence could sometimes be a form of healing. He stayed close, guiding the horse gently, letting her know she wasn't alone. When they reached the ranch, Lena's eyes widened slightly. She looked at the open fields, the animals, and the quiet house. "It's peaceful here," she whispered. Ethan nodded. "It's a safe place. You can stay as long as you need." "No. No." Inside the house, Ethan prepared a small room for her. He placed clean blankets, brought water, and lit a lamp. Lena watched quietly, her face showing a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. She seemed unsure how to behave in a stranger's home, especially during such an emotional moment. "I don't want to cause trouble," she said softly. "I don't know what Daniel wanted you to do. I don't know if I should stay or leave." Ethan shook his head gently. "Daniel wanted you cared for. I gave him my word. You can stay. You don't have to decide anything right now." Lena nodded, her eyes softening with relief. She sat on the bed gently, holding her hands together as if trying to keep herself steady. Ethan stood near the door, unsure if she needed anything else. "If you ever need something," he said, "you can tell me. I'm not used to having someone here, but I'll try my best." Lena gave a small, tired smile, the first sign of warmth Ethan had seen since meeting her. "Thank you for coming for me," she whispered. "I was scared. I didn't know what would happen." Ethan nodded slightly, feeling something stir inside him, not quite sympathy, not quite responsibility, but a mixture of both. He closed the door gently, giving her privacy. Then he walked to the porch and stood outside, letting the cool afternoon breeze hit his face. He knew the days ahead would be complicated. He had lived alone for so long that he wasn't sure how to adjust to someone sharing his space. But he also knew he couldn't go back on his promise. Lena had no one else. And even though this new responsibility felt heavy, he already sensed that turning away from it would have left a deeper weight on his heart. Inside the house, Lena sat quietly, looking around the small but warm room. She touched the blanket gently, feeling comfort she hadn't felt in days. For the first time since Daniel left the cabin, she felt a sense of safety, thin and fragile, but real. And Ethan, standing outside, knew this was only the beginning. Daniel's last words were not just a request. They were a door opening into a new chapter of his life. One he had never planned for, but could no longer avoid. For the first few days, the ranch felt different in a way Ethan wasn't used to. He had lived alone for so many years that even the smallest sound inside the house felt new. Lena moved gently, quietly, as if she didn't want to disturb anything. She kept her steps soft, spoke softly, and stayed mostly inside her room unless she needed water or fresh air. Ethan respected her space. He never asked questions she wasn't ready to answer, and she never asked for more than she needed. It was an unspoken understanding between them, a gentle balance shaped by loss and uncertainty. Every morning, Ethan woke early as usual, fed the animals, and checked the fences. But now, when he walked back toward the house, he sometimes saw Lena standing by the window, watching him with thoughtful eyes. She didn't wave or call out, but there was a quiet connection growing between them, not through words, but through simple presence. Ethan didn't try to force anything. He understood she needed time to adjust to the new world around her. A world without Daniel. One afternoon, Ethan was stacking hay near the barn when he noticed Lena step outside. She stood quietly for a moment, taking in the wide-open land. The wind played gently with her hair, and her eyes seemed softer than before, as if the ranch air was slowly comforting her. Ethan looked up from his work and offered a small nod. Lena returned it with a gentle smile. "I can help with something," she said quietly. "I don't want to sit inside all day." "Thanks." Ethan shook his head lightly. "You don't need to work. You're still." "I want to," she said, not with force but with quiet honesty. "It helps me feel normal. Helps me think." Ethan hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He handed her a pair of gloves and guided her to the smaller tasks, feeding the chickens, collecting eggs, watering the plants in the small garden. Lena moved carefully at first, unsure of herself. But soon, Ethan noticed something surprising. She had a natural calmness around the animals. The chickens didn't shy away from her. The horses turned their heads toward her when she passed by, as if drawn by her gentle presence. Ethan watched in silence, a small sense of ease growing in him. He wasn't used to letting someone else share the ranch work, but something about her quiet determination made him feel it was right. Later that evening, after the sun dipped behind the distant hills, Lena sat on the small porch, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea Ethan had made for her. The sky was turning shades of orange and purple, and the air was cool enough to make the tea comforting. Ethan joined her, sitting on the opposite side of the porch, giving her space but sharing the moment. "I used to sit outside like this," Lena said softly. "When Daniel and I traveled, we sometimes stayed in old houses or quiet places. He loved the silence too. He said, 'Silence helps people hear their own thoughts.'" Ethan listened quietly. Lena wasn't someone who opened up easily, so he appreciated the trust in her words. "He cared for you deeply," Ethan said gently. Lena lowered her gaze. "Yes, he did. But life was never easy for us. Everywhere we went, it felt like someone was watching, like some trouble was always close. I never understood everything he was carrying." She paused, her voice softening. "He always said he would explain things when it was safe, but that day never came." Ethan remembered the key Daniel had placed in his hand. He had not yet shown it to Lena. He didn't know whether she was ready for the truth behind it. He wanted to give her time before introducing something that might reopen the sadness she was trying to calm. Instead, he shifted the conversation gently. "You're doing well here," he said. "The animals seem to have taken a liking to you." Lena gave a small, faint laugh. "Maybe they can sense when someone is trying their best. I'm grateful you trusted me enough to let me help. Maybe they can sense Rye." Ethan nodded slowly. "You don't need to thank me. You're here because Daniel wanted you safe, and I gave him my word." Lena looked at him then, really looked. "I know, but you didn't have to accept. You didn't have to take care of someone you didn't know." Ethan didn't answer right away. He stared at the darkening horizon, thinking of the many years he had spent alone, believing he needed no one, and no one needed him. Then he said quietly, "Maybe it was time my life changed, even if I didn't expect it." Those words stayed between them, warm and meaningful, stretching across the quiet evening. As days passed, Lena slowly began to adjust to life on the ranch. She woke earlier now, sometimes even before Ethan, preparing breakfast or boiling water for tea. She kept the house tidy, watered the small flowers near the porch, and made sure the animals always had clean water. None of it was demanded of her. She did it because she wanted to contribute, to feel part of something steady. Ethan noticed these things but didn't comment on them too often. He simply appreciated the new rhythm forming in the house, a rhythm that felt surprisingly gentle and natural. One day, while Ethan was repairing a broken fence, Lena walked toward him holding a small wooden box. Her face looked thoughtful and a little uncertain. She held the box carefully, almost nervously. "I found this in Daniel's bag," she said softly. "I didn't open it. I didn't know if I should. But I think it's something important." Ethan wiped his hands on a cloth and walked closer. The box looked old, with a small metal lock. He recognized it immediately. It was the lock Daniel's key was meant for. Ethan reached into his pocket and took out the key slowly, feeling its weight once more. Lena's eyes widened slightly. "He gave you that?" Ethan nodded. Before he paused, choosing gentle words. "Before he became too weak. He asked me to take care of you and protect what matters." Lena swallowed softly, a mixture of fear and curiosity swirling in her eyes. "Maybe we should open it," she whispered. Ethan agreed. They sat down at the small table in the house. Ethan inserted the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. With a quiet click, the lock opened. Lena held her breath as Ethan lifted the lid. Inside the box were several papers, old photographs, and a folded map. The papers looked official, something related to land ownership and property that Daniel had mentioned vaguely. Lena's hands shook slightly as she touched the documents. "What is all this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan carefully scanned the papers. They showed proof of a large piece of land belonging to Daniel's family land someone else had wanted. The reason Daniel had been running. The reason he had been so afraid to leave Lena alone. "This is what he was trying to protect," Ethan said quietly. "And this is why someone might come looking." Lena felt her heart beat a little faster. She closed the box gently and pressed her hands together. "I never knew," she said, tears forming again. "He never told me because he didn't want me to worry. He always carried everything alone." Ethan felt something shift inside him, a sense of protection, deeper and stronger than before. Lena looked so fragile, yet so brave, trying to understand a world that had changed completely around her. "You're safe here," Ethan said softly. "No one knows you're here. No one will hurt you. As long as you're on this ranch, you're protected." Lena looked at him with eyes full of quiet trust. "I believe you," she whispered. For the first time since she arrived, Ethan saw something new in her expression, a small spark of hope. Not just safety, not just shelter, but hope. And that single moment changed something in him. He didn't know what the future would hold, but he knew he wouldn't let anything harm her. That night, as the ranch grew silent and stars filled the sky, Ethan felt a strange but comforting realization settle in his heart. Lena was no longer just someone he had promised to protect. She was becoming part of the rhythm of his days, part of the calm of his evenings, part of the slow but steady change happening inside him. And Lena, in her quiet room, looked at the box on her lap and whispered a soft, "Thank you." Not just to Daniel, but to the kind, lonely rancher who had opened his home and unknowingly opened a place in his life for her as well. Their story was only beginning, and neither of them knew how deeply their lives were about to change. But both could feel something taking root, something steady, gentle, and unexpected. The next morning, Lena woke before sunrise. For the first time since she had arrived, she felt a small sense of purpose instead of fear. The wooden box rested safely on a shelf, and even though it carried heavy answers, she felt lighter knowing the truth was no longer hidden. She stepped outside and breathed in the cool morning air. The ranch looked peaceful as the sky slowly turned from gray to gold. Ethan was already outside, checking the horses, his calm movements matching the slow rhythm of the morning. When Ethan noticed her, he gave a gentle nod, the kind that had become his way of saying good morning. Lena walked toward him, her hands lightly brushing the tops of the tall grass. She didn't speak right away. Neither did he. The silence between them felt comfortable now, not awkward. It was a shared understanding, something soft and quiet. Lena finally said, "Thank you. For yesterday. For showing me the papers. For helping me understand." Her voice trembled slightly. Ethan rested his hand on the fence. "You deserve to know," he said simply. "Daniel wanted you safe. And now we know what we're protecting." Lena nodded. She looked at one of the horses, a gentle brown mare with soft eyes. The animal walked closer, as if drawn to her calmness. Lena slowly lifted her hand and stroked the horse's neck. There was something peaceful in the way the animal leaned into her touch. "You're good with them," Ethan said quietly. She smiled faintly. "Maybe they understand me better than people do." Ethan didn't reply, but he understood the feeling more than she knew. Over the next few days, they settled into a new routine. Lena helped more around the house, sweeping the floors, cooking simple meals, and keeping everything neat. Ethan noticed how she brought a natural warmth into the home without trying. A house that once felt empty now felt like it was waking up from a long sleep. Outside, Ethan taught her more about the ranch. He showed her how to mix feed for the horses, how to carry water safely, and how to recognize when an animal needed rest. Lena listened carefully, absorbing every detail with the patience of someone who wanted to learn, not because she had to, but because she genuinely wished to help. One afternoon, clouds began gathering in the sky again, though not as heavily as before. Ethan and Lena were fixing a small shelter near the chicken coop. Ethan lifted a wooden plank, while Lena held it steady. She was still learning to work with tools, but she tried her best. At one point, her grip slipped, and the plank tilted. "Sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to." "It's all right," Ethan said calmly, adjusting the piece. "It takes time. You're doing fine." Lena took a deep breath and nodded. She tried again, this time steadier. Working side by side, they finished the repairs, just as a soft drizzle began to fall. Instead of rushing indoors, they stood under the shelter, watching the light rain paint the earth darker. "It's strange," Lena said softly. "I should feel alone. I should feel scared. But I don't. Not here." Ethan listened, letting her speak at her own pace. Lena continued. "Daniel was always worried. Even when we were safe." He looked over his shoulder. "I loved him, but I could never understand the weight he carried. Now, I finally do. And somehow, being here, it feels like the first time I can breathe." Ethan looked out at the rain. He understood that feeling, how a place could either trap you or set you free. The ranch, for him, had always been a place of escape. Now, it seemed like it was becoming something else, something larger for both of them. When the rain stopped, the air felt cool and fresh. They walked back to the house, not speaking, but not needing to. These quiet moments were creating a bond neither of them expected. A bond built not from romance or dramatic confessions, but from shared silence, shared work, and shared trust. Later that evening, Ethan sat at the table examining the documents again. The land Daniel's family owned was large, far larger than Ethan expected. It wasn't close to the ranch, but it was valuable. Whoever had chased Daniel clearly wanted it for a reason. Ethan frowned as he studied the signatures. He wondered how far this danger stretched, and whether Lena was still in risk. Lena stepped into the room, holding a cup of tea. She placed it beside him gently. "You're thinking too hard," she said softly. Ethan gave a small smile. "Just trying to understand what we're dealing with. Do you think they'll come?" she asked. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "But if they do, they won't find you easily, and they won't find you alone." Lena lowered her gaze, touched by the sincerity in his voice. She sat across from him, her hands wrapped around her cup. "I want to help," she said after a while. "I don't want to hide forever. I want to understand the papers too. Ethan nodded. Then we'll learn together. They spent the next hour going through the documents slowly. Ethan explained what he understood, and Lena shared what Daniel had told her over the years, connecting pieces of the puzzle he had left behind. They discovered that Daniel had been trying to secure the land legally, but someone else tried to claim it secretly. That was what started the trouble. Lena leaned back and sighed. I wish I could have helped him more. Ethan shook his head gently. You supported him in your own way. Sometimes being there is enough. She looked at him with soft eyes, grateful for his words. Days turned into a gentle pattern. They ate meals together, worked side by side, and shared conversations that slowly opened more pieces of their hearts. Lena talked about her childhood, her dreams, and the things she missed. Ethan shared stories he rarely told anyone about his parents, about why he chose the quiet ranch life, and about the peace he found in open spaces. One evening, the sky was clear and full of stars. Lena stepped outside, and Ethan joined her. They stood quietly, watching the vast sky stretch endlessly above them. Do you ever feel small out here? She asked. Sometimes, Ethan replied. But not in a bad way. It reminds me that life is bigger than my fears. Lena smiled softly. I think I'm starting to feel that too. A small breeze moved through the grass, carrying the soft scent of earth and the sound of crickets. For a moment, Lena closed her eyes, letting the peace settle inside her. Ethan watched her, noticing how different she looked now compared to the frightened woman he had found at the cabin. She looked stronger, calmer, almost glowing in the soft starlight. Thank you, she said quietly, for letting me stay, for being patient with me, for giving me a place to breathe. Ethan didn't reply right away. He looked at the sky, then at her. You don't need to thank me. You're not a burden. You're part of the ranch now. Lena's eyes softened. I'm glad, because I don't feel like leaving. Those words stayed with Ethan long after they went inside. He lay in bed that night thinking about them. Something had changed inside her, inside him, and inside the quiet ranch that now felt full of life. The bond between them wasn't forced. It wasn't romantic in a rushed way. It was calm, steady, built from kindness and shared experiences. A connection growing quietly, but deeply. Ethan finally drifted to sleep with one clear thought lingering in his heart. His life was changing. Not because he planned it, but because it was meant to. And Lena, lying awake in her room, felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Safety, warmth, and hope for tomorrow. Their futures were weaving together slowly, softly, and naturally, and neither of them knew just how much stronger this bond would become in the days ahead. The next days passed quietly, but the quiet was different now. It wasn't the empty silence that once filled Ethan's ranch. It was a peaceful stillness, filled with soft sounds of daily life, Lena humming in the kitchen, the clinking of dishes, the gentle tapping of her steps on the wooden floor. Ethan found himself listening for those sounds without even realizing it. They were slowly becoming part of what home meant. But even with this gentle calm around them, a question remained heavy in Ethan's mind. How long would this peace last? He knew the truth. Danger had been following Daniel for months. People who wanted the land documents might still be searching. And if they discovered Daniel was gone, they might come looking for Lena. One morning, as Ethan checked the ranch gates, he noticed fresh boot prints on the ground near the main road. They were not his, and they were not Lena's. They were recent. His heart tightened slightly. Someone had been nearby. Ethan didn't tell Lena immediately. He didn't want to frighten her. Instead, he rode into town to speak to the sheriff, a man he trusted for many years. When he walked into the small office, Sheriff Hayes looked up from his desk. "Morning, Ethan. Something troubling you?" the sheriff asked, noticing the concern on his face. Ethan explained everything. From the moment he found Daniel at his gate, to the documents hidden inside the wooden box. The sheriff listened carefully, tapping his fingers lightly on the desk. When Ethan finished, the sheriff nodded slowly. You did the right thing coming here. I'll keep an eye out. And I'll make sure a deputy checks the roads around your ranch. If anyone tries to cause trouble, you let me know, right away. Ethan thanked him and headed back home. The ride felt longer than usual. Not because of the distance, but because of the weight on his mind. He knew he needed to stay strong not only to protect Lena, but to keep the promise he made to Daniel. A promise he now felt in his heart, not just in duty. When Ethan returned to the ranch, Lena was on the porch, sweeping the wooden steps. She smiled when she saw him, but her smile faded a little when she noticed the serious look on his face. Is something wrong? She asked gently. Ethan walked closer, pausing for a moment before answering. There were boot marks near the main road. Someone passed through. Lena gripped the broom handle tightly. Her eyes widened with worry, but she took a steady breath. Do you think they were looking for me? It's possible, Ethan said honestly, but the sheriff knows now. He'll watch the area. You're safe here. Lena nodded slowly. She looked scared, but there was something else in her expression. Trust. She believed Ethan, even if the world frightened her. That night, Ethan stayed awake longer than usual, sitting by the window with a lamp burning softly beside him. Lena noticed the light under his door when she came out for water. She stepped closer and spoke softly. You don't have to stay awake all night. Ethan looked at her, his eyes tired but calm. I just want to make sure everything is all right. Lena hesitated, then sat down on the chair across from him. The room was quiet except for the soft ticking of the old wall clock. You don't have to carry everything alone, she said gently. Daniel tried that, and it broke him. I don't want that to happen to you. So. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Her words touched a place deep inside him, a place he rarely let anyone reach. He let out a slow breath and nodded. Thank you, Lena. I'll be all right. She gave him a soft smile, then returned to her room. Ethan finally rested after a while, comforted by the honesty and warmth she had shown him. The next morning, an unexpected knock came at the door. Ethan opened it cautiously and found Sheriff Hayes standing there with 2 deputies. They weren't alarmed, but alert. We found the men who were wandering near your property, the sheriff said. They were in town asking questions about Daniel. They didn't know he passed away. Lena stood behind Ethan, listening quietly. Her hands trembled slightly, but she stayed close. What will happen to them? Ethan asked. We questioned them, the sheriff replied. With the papers you showed me, it's clear they're trying to take something that doesn't belong to them. We'll keep them in custody until the matter is settled. You both are safe for now. ADC. ADC. Lena let out a slow breath, almost like she had been holding it for days. Ethan thanked the sheriff, and after they left, Lena stepped outside to sit on the porch. Her shoulders relaxed for the first time since the box had been opened. Ethan joined her. They sat side by side, watching the open fields sway with the wind. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Lena turned to him. You protected me, she said softly. Not because Daniel asked you to, but because you wanted to. Ethan looked down at his hands, trying to gather words that felt honest. Yes, he said quietly. I didn't realize it at first, but I didn't protect you out of duty. I did it because you matter. Lena's eyes softened, and she looked away shyly, touched more deeply than words could express. I don't know where I belong now, she admitted softly. But when I'm here, I feel safe. I feel calm. Maybe for the first time in my life. Ethan turned his head slowly, watching her with a gentleness he hadn't shown anyone in years. You can stay here, he said. Not because of a promise, not because you have nowhere else to go, but because this can be your home, if you want it to be. Lena's breath caught slightly. She looked around the ranch, the fields, the barn, the horses grazing in the distance. Then she looked at Ethan, the man who had been a stranger, a protector, and slowly, something more. "I want to stay," she whispered. "More than anything." Ethan felt something warm grow inside his chest. Not fast, not overwhelming, just warm and steady, like sunlight on a cold morning. From that day forward, life on the ranch changed completely. Lena no longer moved carefully, afraid of taking too much space. She started smiling more, humming as she worked. She added small touches to the house, flowers in a jar, clean curtains, warm meals that filled the home with comforting smells. Ethan found himself looking forward to every moment. He laughed more, spoke more, and allowed himself to feel the presence of another soul beside him. The loneliness that once wrapped itself around his life slowly loosened, replaced by a feeling he didn't know he had been missing. Lena began helping with larger tasks on the ranch. Ethan taught her how to ride a horse, how to guide the animals, how to plant seeds for the coming season. She learned quickly, especially because she felt cared for and safe. Evenings became their favorite time when the sun slowly dipped behind the hills and painted the sky in warm colors. They sat together on the porch, sharing stories, soft laughter, and quiet moments that spoke louder than words. Day by day, without rushing, without forcing anything, they grew closer. Not out of obligation, not out of fear, but out of a gentle connection, shaped by kindness, trust, and shared healing. Ethan often thought about the day Daniel appeared at his gate, broken and desperate. He remembered the promise he had made and the responsibility he had accepted. But now, when he looked at Lena, he understood something deeper. Daniel had not only trusted him with a duty, but had unknowingly given him a chance at a new life. A chance at companionship, at warmth, at meaning. One quiet evening, Lena looked at Ethan with soft, steady eyes and said, "I thought my life ended the day Daniel didn't return. But now, I think it was the beginning of something new. None, 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 none." Ethan took a slow breath, feeling the truth in her words. And with that, two lonely paths that had once been filled with fear and emptiness finally found each other, creating a future neither of them had expected, a future built from trust, from quiet moments, from new hope, and from a bond that changed Ethan's life forever.